Okay, sorry about that. For those of you that are having difficulties finding me, YouTube, for whatever reason, decided, hey, Dave, glad you're here. Glad you can make it. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know what happened, but I could not start the stream. I had to log in again, and then I have no idea what went on. I could activate the stream with my stream software, but it wouldn't allow me to start it on YouTube. I could chat, but that was it. Really weird. So anyway, hope I don't drop a lot of viewers. So far, just one has showed up, but that's fine. Yeah. So, let's get started anyway, and we'll get to a slow rolling start. Oh wow, it says now I'm getting other problems with YouTube. Dave, is this coming through okay? Is it working okay? Oh well, we'll try it. Backup streams correctly. The comparison of the streams failed because one of the streams has an invalid configuration. Well, YouTube, that's because you screwed up. Not my fault. Anyway, yeah. So let's get started, and we'll get into it. And so today we're going to talk about measuring the safety culture vital signs. A couple of weeks ago, and sorry I missed a stream last week. It was a beautiful day, and the mountains were calling me. I had to go hiking, and but just to get caught up, thanks, Dave. Welcome to all of you that are joining, whether you're joining on the chat at the moment or you're joining on the live stream later on or viewing the video later on. But as I said, last stream we talked about some of the anecdotal things, some of the observations that you could make regarding your safety culture and determining, well, do I have the flu? Do I have a cold? Or is it something worse, and something that you could do to have a look and maybe start to make some observations, ask some questions, and gather just some thoughts so you can clarify and verify your position. But now what we're going to do is talk more about the vital signs. Now, if you've ever done any kind of advanced first aid or pre-hospital care or whatever the case may be, in the field, you're going to do vital signs on a casualty, because when they hit the hospital and become a patient, or depending on what level you're at as a paramedic or whatever, they're a patient already, but you're going to start digging deeper. You can see things and the patient's telling you things that are wrong, but you're going to start digging deeper, and you're going to look at things like pulse rates and breathing character and pulse oximetry and blood pressure and all of that stuff to help you better determine what the overall patient condition is. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to talk about those vital signs, some of those things that you can look at to dig deeper and to make that idea and look at maybe hopefully point in the direction of some problems. And whether it be well, actually, before we get into it, let's just talk about the chat rules, and we'll start with that, and then we'll go a little bit further. So, as I've said before, if you're joining, you don't have to hide in the stream. If you're in the chat, introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? What brought you here? Are you into safety, or is it you found your way here by mistake? Whatever the case. It's nice to hear from you. So just introduce yourself. Who are you? And yeah, why you're here. Now, the other thing is, ask and answer questions. If a question gets asked in the chat and I've answered it, but you have a different opinion or things work different in your jurisdiction, by all means, chime in. Same thing goes with you folks that are looking at this afterwards, after the stream's been completed. Go ahead, leave a comment. About something, by all means. We practice, all of us practice safety in very similar fashion a lot of times, because basically we're trying to put a barrier between the hazards and the worker. That's essentially what we're trying to do as safety professionals. But how we get there and how we go about it sometimes can differ depending on the jurisdiction, the situation, the industry, etc. So it's always a good idea to just weigh in, give your opinion. Your knowledge and your opinions count. Now, on that note though, please do me a favor. Be civil. No name calling, no insults, okay? As I've said many times, not all of us popped out of the womb knowing safety right off the bat. We've all had to learn, and sometimes, in some cases, like mine, the hard way. Okay, so no name calling, no insults. Now, the other thing is, this is not professional advice, okay? The idea is I'm sharing, and a lot of cases, hey Dave, Newmarket, Ontario, safety student at the University of Calgary. Hey, you're right in my backyard. Good stuff. Isn't it the internet wonderful and doing things distance? It's awesome. But once again, this isn't professional advice. No contracts are being signed. No money is changing hands. There's no memorandums of understanding. It's just me working on that idea of creating a community where people can collaborate. But also, too, is I'm trying to share, bring back, give back to the community that helped me along in so many ways. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here. Now, always try to start off with what's new. And thankfully, though, we haven't lost the news yet. And so what I mean by losing the news is we'll all be able to always go to news sites, but having that service out there that aggregates them for us, like, Google. And now it's happened due to our illustrious leader, call him what you will. They've decided now that the big boys who are just aggregating and basically link farming, there's no gain off of it. And you're able to click on those links and go to the news site and get the news. But anyway, I digress. We can still get it. So one of the things I want to talk a bit about, and it also segues into what we're talking about, the article does talk about safety culture, but safety investigations being investigated in the news. We're going to have a look at this in just a sec. So let's just have a quick look at this right now. I'm going to share the browser screen and you'll be able to have a look at it. And not my YouTube stream. Let's look at this one. There we go. So it's titled, Friends, Family, Remember a Calgary Man in a Workplace Fatality. And so this fella, Jeff Cho, was working at what looked like a stonemasonry, a warehouse for building materials, and the workplace fatality at LX Hoss warehouse in Northeast Calgary. So now, part of the problem, and I'll scroll through to, is the family and friends want answers as to what went so terribly wrong. This is no different in any kind of industrial accident. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if you're working in construction, oil and gas, retail, hospitality. It doesn't matter where you're working. When a worker ends up dying as a result of an injury, an incident, you know what? They want to know right away. Family wants to know right away. They want answers and they want them now. And now the problem is investigating it in the news. So we have here that Cho was crushed by a massive slab of marble while working in the warehouse. And now here's the other problem that bothers me here. We see that Sunny Sandhu, and then read the rest of it, who was fired with no explanation in mid-July. And Mario Moreno, who was terminated September 1st. Now, that may be unjustly terminated. It may have been, I have no idea why it happened. I don't. I have no idea why they were terminated or whatever. And once again, this is why investigating safety situations in the news is a bad thing. Okay? Because people leap to conclusions all the time. And what happens is it causes biases when the experts who are trying to do the investigation are hit upon by the public. And so if we look a little further here, whoops, let's scroll the right way. Okay. Now, what happened was, like, once again, he was, there was possibly too many marble slabs for the A-frame pallets. I don't know. But once again, the men provided 2 videos of a man who they said was the supervisor in the company walking in the warehouse and the yard near the forklift with flip-flops. Well, we all know that, you know what, PPE is an absolute necessity, as well as the rest of the other safety gear you're supposed to be wearing. But the other problem is they call in another fellow, and it's this fella, Dean Winnan, a safety scientist within Tactics, and now they're a safety organization. Whatever, you can look them up if you want. I'll post a link in the description if anybody wants afterwards. But once again, when you start calling in experts in the field, and he likely is a very, very competent person. I looked him up on LinkedIn, and he does have a lot of certification and degrees behind his name. But what happens is once again, you're making conclusions without knowing all the facts. But at least he says some wise things here. He said, well, protective equipment like proper footwear, safety vests, or helmets would not have been enough to prevent the catastrophic injuries, and not when you're crushed by a massive slab of marble. But he believes it speaks to the company's overall workplace safety culture. And he's absolutely right there. Okay? Most organizations have a policy around PPE, and if it's not being worn and not being enforced by management, that's usually an organizational issue. Absolutely, and some of what we're going to talk about tonight. But he also made a statement about CPS, which is the Calgary Police Service, should, in concert with OHS, enter into the investigation to determine whether there are aspects of criminal negligence. There was a memorandum of understanding signed between all of the major police departments in Alberta back in 2018, I believe, regarding that anytime there is a workplace fatality, CPS is supposed to be involved. So, not sure exactly how this came about that they're not involved. I have no idea. But once again, this is the harm of investigating occupational incidents in the news. And it shouldn't be. Any incident should be investigated by the people who are trained and knowledgeable in how to do it. Once again, the media, and I have enough complaints about mainstream media anyway, but if you look at this website here, and once again, I'll post a link in the description, it's absolutely chock full of advertisements. Okay? So, mainstream media is in business for one thing, and that's to sell advertising hours. That's it. They also sensationalize the news in a lot of cases and take a different bent. And that's why they should stay the heck out of incident investigation and let the experts, let the adults do it. Just stay out of it. And this piece is absolutely terrible. And yeah, it's global. What can I say? Anyway, enough of that rant. I've also had a recent request for a hazard assessment series, and I was thinking of redoing all of my hazard assessment series anyway. But what I'm going to do, and please let me know in the chat and the comments what you think of this idea, because maybe it'll die before it ever hits the airwaves. I'm going to do the same basically format as I'm going to do with this. And I'm going to start right from what is a hazard and work all the way into completing a job safety analysis or a job hazard analysis or whatever in the different formats, which would be talking about informal hazard assessments, talking about site-specific or field-level hazard assessments, talking about high-risk complex task hazard assessments and the formal job hazard assessment, but also talking about doing that ongoing hazard assessment process where you may complete one before you start work on a job site, but because the job site's going to be there for a few months or whatever, think construction, how that hazard assessment is going to morph and change and move about. So it's going to be over the course of a bunch of Thursday evenings, is what I've thought about doing. Same time, 7 o'clock, and each one will go from anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on the length of the material, and of course, how many questions I get. And the idea is I'll ask and answer. There'll be questions asked and answered in the chat. I will also, at the end of each presentation, just a quick short quiz where everybody can enter in the answers in the chat, just to, as an idea. You won't get a certificate from it or anything else like that. It's just more on being able to sharpen and hone your skills. And so I thought I'd see where it goes. And that's where I'm headed. So I got asked about doing videos on the JSA, JHA issue. And I thought, why not? Let's do a series of live streams over it. And basically the same thing as what you see right here. Slide on, nope, that way. That side of the screen. And with the material, me talking like this, and then at the end, I'll just pop up one question at a time, and then people can answer it, and then I'll offer the right question, and people can, anything I don't answer on the stream, whatever people leave in comments, I'll answer those questions on the following stream. So once again, tell me what your thoughts are. Yeah. Now, something else here, and I'll leave the link in the description when I'm done. And the reason I don't do it beforehand is because I don't want people to go, oh yeah, that video, I'm going to go watch that video instead of watching Kevin's stream. Not saying that my stream's captivating or anything else like that, but this idea here is, and I did this video a while ago, just urging you as safety professionals, go beyond the write-up. You have that opportunity for correction and whether you want to call it a teachable moment, a learning opportunity, whatever you want to call it, you have that opportunity with that. So instead of a write-up, is there a possible way that you can, instead of calling it a write-up, call it like a safety coach or a safety moment or anything like that? And so watch it, have a look, and then of course, once again, like I said, I appreciate your comments. Believe you me. And now the other thing is, got a couple of guest spots popping up here. One of them is Dan Patterson, an Australian OHS professional, owns his own company in New South Wales, and reached out to me. Now, we've been really having difficulty because there's 17 hours difference between us. And so we've been having difficulty. I'm hoping next week to have him on. However, if he isn't able to make it, or whatever the case may be, we'll postpone it and we'll eventually get it going. But we want to talk about, well, basically safety culture and safety hurdles as we see it between both Canada and Australia. As he put it, we're both Commonwealth countries, but we do things a lot differently. And then also to think about it is, it's only a little over 30 years that they've really had OHS legislation and an OHS movement in Australia. So should be an interesting conversation. I'm hoping I can get that tidied up and going for next weekend. And it'll be the same time, 7 o'clock. Now, the other person is both a friend and colleague, and we worked together before. And Mike Sonderman, he's an HR professional, and he has a specialty in investigating bullying and harassment. So also want him to talk about some of the investigative points on it, but also too, talking about the damage to workplace culture with bullying and harassment. And so tying the two of them together, and that's why it's important to investigate it, deal with it, and get over it as quick as possible so that your health and safety culture will recover. So anyway, here we go. We can get moving on a bit further here. So let's just do a quick recap here of what we've covered up to this point. So like I said before, you can start anecdotally and then consider when and where to collect your data. Have those talks, have those conversations, make your observations, but then consider the different signs and symptoms. And last stream, we talked about some of the different ones, whether they could be things like unreported injuries, incomplete or absent investigations, delayed or incomplete corrective actions, and more. If you haven't seen that stream, go watch the one previous to this and then come back and watch this one. It gives you context. And then we also talked about the different documentation to the functions of people and groups, etc., all the way down, because I've seen situations where people low on the hierarchy, the employment, the workplace hierarchy, can be some of the most damaging to a safety culture if it's not dealt with. But I suppose I should actually also just redefine safety culture. And so in case you haven't seen the previous live streams or you don't want to go back and forth yet, a safety culture is a group of people or an organization that places a high value on safety, believing in the benefits of it and practicing safety, of course. Now, once again, another thing to think about is a group of people simply not only saying that safety matters, but they're absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And not only are they saying it, but they're living it out in their actions and meeting the corporate goals and expectations with safety. And one of the things I've heard so many times, hey, you know what? Safety is one thing, but we got work to do here. Really? Okay. Well, there we go. So, just a note to the safety professionals out there, though, a safety culture is just more valuable than you might think. Something else to consider is with a healthy safety culture, and I made a few short videos about this, but I want to remind you that if you're working on building that safety culture and you have a healthy safety culture, you no longer have to push and coerce into compliance. In fact, you can combine that robust safety culture with promotion of sound safety principles, and you're no longer pushing into compliance. You're now having an opportunity where you can coach into continuous improvement. Okay? So anyway, here we are. Let's talk about these vital signs. Okay? And one of the first ones, of course, is let's talk about the injury rates. Okay? They're often just a good indicator. Okay? What you need to do is go back and look at your WCB injury reports, or your insurance, depending on where you are, what country you're in, your insurance injury reports. Because, Dave, did you go? Oh, well. If they're flat, that's great. Okay. But do they correspond with what you see? Are these WCB reports, are they climbing? And if so, why? When did it start? So go back a ways and look at when the reports started to climb, when the injury rates started to climb, when the increases started. This is important because you might find it's something significant with another event. Oh, good. Glad to hear you're still here, Dave. So it might coincide with something else. Hopefully not a change in leadership. Once I just did an investigation of a certain work area, and I found when a new person took over, but I went back and I looked and there was no injuries, and you know what, I'm sort of letting the cat out of the bag. Let's talk more here. Look at your first aid reports versus WCB reports. Okay, one of the things that tends to happen in an organization where they have a bad safety culture is you'll find that people are going off of work with injuries that aren't reported to the employer. So there's no first aid record, but they're off work. And so why is that? And the other thing is if you can look at these WCB reports and how many are happening for stress or other mental health related claims. Are they on the increase? Start looking at the numbers and of course when did it occur? Start examining and looking at your trends because they can be a big indicator. But on the other side of that is graduated return to work and return to work. What does the process look like? If you've got people who have been off for a sprained ankle and they're still just that ankle is not getting better, are you having to drag them back to work, and why is that? The other thing is there a cooperative environment between safety, the health and safety committee, the workers, etc., getting that graduated return to work, or do you have a dedicated group that's looking after it, and are they engaged? One of the things that you'll find in an area and an organization with a bad safety culture is it seems like the graduated return to work and return to work process is not working. People don't have a desire to come back to work. And why not? If work is a terrible place, why would they want to come back? I even once was interviewing somebody and he said, well, if I come back, they'll likely fire me. I honestly didn't know how to take that. I honestly didn't. Where's my mouse? There's my mouse. There's my mouse. Sorry, guys. I just want to check something. Let me turn the music down even more. There we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, besides your graduated return to work, part of the group that works with them is your Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. And not all the time. In some areas, the Health and Safety Committee isn't part of it. Some areas they are. And so totally up to you. But no matter what, your Health and Safety Committee are stewards of your health and safety program and your health and safety management system. So are they engaged or are they disengaged? So the very first thing you want to do is start looking at the minutes. Do they look like cookie cutter? Do they look like somebody literally took and put them through a photocopier and just changed the date? Are they copied from previous? Or when you're examining, are you seeing that the same person sending regrets all the time, or the same 3 or 4 people, or they can't ever get quorum to vote on anything? Are the chairs engaged? Do the minutes match the agenda? Are you seeing that, like things where you see a healthy safety culture is you're seeing last minute agenda items, or you see that there's guests noted that are came and showed up, or somebody's come and given a presentation, or they've had to read out some memos or letters from other workers who have sent material in. That's a good functioning health and safety committee. Okay. So once again, when did they go bad? Like if all of a sudden you're seeing minutes that go back like that, look like that, go back further to when you had good minutes, and then find that area where they went bad. At least, if anything, you have a waypoint, a road marker of when it happened. But then you also have something to start looking for the signs and symptoms for when things get better. And I'll give you a hint. One of the ways that you can help save a safety culture at any time is work on that health and safety committee. If you're a safety professional and you're starting with a new organization and you don't know much, one of the very first things you want to do is have a look at that safety committee. Because the other thing you want to know is, are there regular meeting minutes, regular meetings happening? Is it like, do their terms of reference say, yep, we meet the third Monday of every month at 3 o'clock, and you go back and you look, and the third Monday of every month they're there except for statutory holidays? And that's awesome if they're meeting regularly. And are the members there? Does it show that they're all there, or they're consistent absences, as I mentioned before? Now, the next thing is, what about action items? Are they resolved or are they not? Do you see the word tabled used lots? Or do you see the same action item sitting with that same person tasked with that action? So once again, are you having safety committee members who aren't pulling their weight and there's no course of action about it? See, the other thing is if you have people who are attached to safety and they're not doing that job, or they're not doing what's expected of them, that also drags down the safety culture, whether it's the safety professional who's hired to be that person, members of the safety committee, a safety representative, or even the person who's just tasked with changing the material on the OHS board. If they're not doing it, it affects your safety culture. It affects that safety atmosphere. Okay? So the next thing is, what about the communications between the health and safety committee and the employer? What's the worker awareness like? Do you do core audits where you are, certificate of recognition for those of you in Canada? Or do you do any kind of safety awareness audits and determining? Because one of the questions that really shows a good safety culture is when you're asking how workers, how they make suggestions or bring concerns to a safety committee. And if they're saying, I don't know, that's a problem. Or if you ask them, who are the members of the safety committee? And if they go, or they rattle off the names, if they rattle off the names, that's a good thing. If they give you a stunned look, that's a bad thing. The other bad thing is if they, they're on the OHS board, I'll have to go have a look and get back to you. Once again, same thing, because that means there may be a safety committee, but they're not engaging at the worker level. Okay? So, Houston, we got a problem. Okay? That almost sounded like Lucy, we got a problem. But anyway, there's a definite lack of communication and a lack of awareness and what have you. So that's an issue. And those things need to be fixed. Now, the other big one is executive apathy. Safety has to be top down, bottom up. That it has to be that way. There has to be a meet in the middle. And the problem is the bottom can only go so far. Same thing as the top can only go so far. Okay? There has to be a meeting in the middle. So here's the very first question. Is safety on the executive meeting agendas? No, you might not have, you might not be privy to them. You might not know. And totally understandable. Okay? I understand that. However, can you ask your boss to ask their boss to ask their boss and find out? Okay. Is anything even remotely attached to safety on the agendas? That's the other thing. And I'm not talking about a speed bump. Does anybody have a safety minute here? Do you want to talk about the icy sidewalks? Like, even that is better than nothing. But good organizations where everything is healthy, it's where there's a spot in the agenda where the executive is reviewing even the high-level safety stats and the safety performance in some way, shape, or form. If they're not, it's not a healthy place. It's not. The other thing is the safety professional or the safety group or whatever part of growth and expansion planning? And I mean, whether it's a new building, a new wing, even if it's just changing a shift around or whatever, if there's no involvement, like, okay, good organizations provide safety with updates to the plan even. Okay, great organizations bring safety to the planning table. Poor organizations, well, what happens is safety is cleaning up the messes because they didn't bring them to the table. I worked for somebody once, and he said to me, you'd get invited to the table more often, but every time you come, you shoot holes in everything we do. There'd be a reason for that, because those holes are what's going to get a worker hurt. But what happens is afterwards, when, well, say for instance, when I worked at an organization and I asked time and time again to be able to come to the table. And the worst part about it is the director, well, he was clueless. My AVP that I first worked for, he was incredible and incredibly smart. The director that took over was absolutely clueless and was just busy looking at his own potential growth. And when I asked to be part of the planning on things and just even if I could just be a fly in the wall, we will let you know when you're needed. That's what I got. Well, after things like potential fires, workers falling, and actually the whole electrical grid shutting down in a building once. Oh yes, and water leaking through onto a 400 amp service. That was a good one too. See my point? Okay, so poor organizations decide when they're going to tell safety what needs to happen, and then safety's busy trying to mop things up afterwards. Okay, and now company communications that don't include safety is the other one. And no matter what, whether it's a town hall and the CEO's getting up there to talk, even if there's a little bit, like I've seen really good town hall, like I've seen good CEOs, CAOs, etc., who, when the core audit's done, immediately have a town hall just to address that. But when they do their mid-year one, they still talk about the action plan and where they are on it, and the outstanding items that need to be fixed. So that's good stuff. That's a great organization when you have executives and they make company communications include safety. Now, bad things also are, and these are things that are, once again, like I said, these are a vital sign. They're like, this is like a flat line almost, or if you've ever seen what VTAC looks like, this is what it is. It's where you're punishing workers for safety issues. And by all means, I know organizations, like for one large lumber manufacturer, if an employee crossed the chain, it was immediate termination. Turn in your locks, turn in your ID, clean out your locker, you're done. And I understood that. But here's the question. Why are the employees making that effort to cross the chain and possibly step into a drive line? You're not looking at the big picture. Okay? So if we're punishing employees for safety infractions, and I'm not saying that negligence or outright willful noncompliance shouldn't be dealt with appropriately. Absolutely. Okay, if someone's willfully being negligent, purposely being non-compliant, yes, you should be dealing with them appropriately with the appropriate progressive discipline process. But organizations that just seek to be punitive with every safety infraction, you're going to get a letter on your file. Oh, here's your safety ticket. It makes it worse. And what happens is people try to avoid safety, or they avoid engaging with safety, and it ruins the safety culture. What about the notion of remedial training first, after investigating the incident? So here's the question. Where's your organization on that spectrum? Okay. And this leads me into the next point. And that's exactly what I mentioned about that video beforehand. A focus on write-ups versus solutions. Now, I've seen things like stop audit tickets and whatnot, and they seem to be this person's half-baked idea of a safety solution. Yes, you're bringing the issue to the attention of the workers, but are you stopping there? Like, here's your safety ticket. Now, if you're doing that, you're ruining your chance at, like I said earlier, a teachable moment. But what's happening is you're part of the problem of an ailing safety culture. So why not do things like look for the root cause? Why did the infraction occur? Find out, and then be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But on that note, um, are there repeat write-ups? Do you have frequent flyers, and why? Why are there continuing circumstances of safety infractions? And why is that similar incident occurring? And I honestly, I have had workers tell me it's just plain faster. Yes, but you're putting yourself at risk. And like you said, well, I can remember guys that were riding the forks of a forklift all the time, and I said, dude, you guys can't do that. And yeah, but it takes me longer to walk back. And Kevin, I'm eating into my lunch break. Well, okay, then take a little bit longer in your lunch break. You don't have to have lunch at 12 o'clock. If you get back at 12:10, then take till 22. Yes, but I'm the boss. I was the boss at that time. So, but I mean, those sort of things have to happen. You have to find out why you have frequent flyers. Is this a case of apathy and disregard by the workers, or worse? I made a root cause video about it. What about supervisors? And I've seen that issue too, where the supervisors don't enforce anything. Okay? And you got to start digging into the behavior too. Is this behavior recently, or is this something that's been ingrained? Dig deep and find out. Because if it was a better attitude before, what caused the attitude to change? What ruined it? What changed things? One of the biggest things you're ever going to ask people when you're doing a workup on a patient or what have you is, when did you notice this change, or whatever the case may be? Often in organizations, and I've seen it, and I've gone into organizations and I've started digging through the documents and doing an investigation, and you'll find pivotal events that have changed things. And that's what I'm talking about. So now the other thing that you see too much too is disengaged workers and supervisors. So when you're seeing it, and these are part of your observations, but these are what you need to record when you're making your presentations, when you're deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to treat things. Because is there more of a focus on cell phones versus the toolbox talks? Are the workers engaged or disengaged? But why is that? Why are they? Is it because the toolbox talks and the safety meetings are just like a safety bump in the road and they just want to get back to work? Read the room and have a look. What's it look like and why? But also look at the toolbox talks. I sat through a toolbox talk once, and literally I almost fell asleep with the safety stuff. And literally the guy was going through and he was talking about hard hats and gloves. And I look around, everybody's wearing hard hats and gloves. Why are you doing that? Okay, so once again, is the safety talk putting people to sleep? Is it putting people off safety? Okay, but also too is if you're doing audits, what's the audit interview? And hey Dan, welcome Dan. This is Dan, who's going to join me next week. Yes, Dan, we will. Dan, I sent you a WhatsApp invite too, okay, buddy? So hook up with that and we can chat back and forth with WhatsApp. Anyway, getting back to this, if you're doing those core audits or those safety awareness audits or those compliance audits, what's the audit engagement like? Okay, start recording that. And doing a few audits, like it's neat. Like when the good audits are the ones where the interviews, you're having to hurry people along because they just want to talk and talk and talk and talk. And they just so engaged in safety. Like literally they're fun, but it's like, hey, next question, please. Where the other ones are yes, no, and that's it. So what are your interviews like? What is that telling you about your employee engagement? And in this series, we're going to talk more about interviews and surveys and what kind of questions to ask, but that's going to be down the road a bit. and it's pretty important. It is. Now, the other thing is the safety activity, and this is basically all of the safety activities. But when we talk about toolbox talks, audit interviews, or even investigative interviews, same thing. But what about the inspection and participation? When I first joined an organization, it was funny. Came in, and the supervisor said, "Okay, everybody, time. Safety's here. They're going to do an inspection. Let's go have a coffee." Seriously? And I said, no. Keep them here. It's all good. I want to watch them run their equipment. I want to watch them do their jobs. That's part of it. I mean, if you see a facility take a break during an inspection, that's a problem. The same thing is with investigations. You're conducting an investigation, and you see an issue, and you want to talk to an employee, and that employee gives you those terse answers, and they're disengaged. Now, sometimes it might be just because they're afraid, honestly. But if you're trying to interact and interact with employees and workers during the regular safety activities, and there's no interaction, or there's not wanting to bother with you, then that's an issue with your safety culture. It really is. And you'll see, as your safety culture starts to get better, the interaction will also start to get better too. Honestly, and I have had it where I started with an organization, and I went in to meet with a group at their health and safety committee, one of the different committees. And the director shook my hand and said, "You're the new safety manager, eh?" And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, "Well, a piece of advice, rent, don't buy." So I went back and I had a look. In the same organization, the safety managers lasted there about 2 years. And and I only lasted 5. But I was the longest running one in 25 years. So go figure. So that tells you a bit about safety cultures but as I noticed, it was not a good safety culture. But that same dean that told me that, or the same director that told me that, he said, when he was leaving, he said, "Kevin, I've been here for 20 years and you've done more for the safety culture here than anybody before you." But part of it is looking for the problems and getting into the problems and digging deep. And that's why I've been talking about some of these vital signs. So now the other one that you'll see too is this: production priorities over safety. And a big one I see is this, and you see it all the time. I hate it. I wish organizations would take the signs down that say so many days without injury. Because the moment something happens, morale goes down and everything. And then you know what? It's just the safety culture has to have a bit of a start, and things don't start coming up until we're back at 100 days without an injury again, or what have you. The other thing I see as a problem is prizes for safety. Yeah, if we go a year without safety, everybody gets a jacket. Then or without injury, everybody gets a jacket. Incident reports aren't happening. Inspections are being faked. Job hazard assessments are pencil whipped. Everything so everybody can get that jacket, get that prize. Because it really doesn't matter. Whatever carrot you dangle in front of their face, people will often try to get it because that's our nature. We're competitive by nature. So that's the other piece that I see. And that usually it's that same thing. Focus on number of days without injury so that we can boost production. Whereas realistically, a good organization will look at minimizing loss as their first order of duty or first order of practice. And once again, same thing. Is safety just a speed bump during planning? It's like, okay, quick, everybody, let's do a job hazard assessment. Everybody have a look at it. Okay, we're done. Now let's move on with work. And I hazard to say this, and I'm going to have people that will shoot me down, but The key root of almost every single incident or accident, except with the exceptions of the ones that have been caused with malice, willful malfeasance, and willful noncompliance, is usually an inattention to hazards, either a lack of a good hazard assessment or hazards were not properly controlled because they weren't properly identified, etc. And so, once again, we got work to do here, right? The other one I see is a bad one, and it's bad as you see workers working with obvious injuries. Oh, wow. Dan, you and I are going to have so much to talk about next week, and I'm hoping that we can really advertise it, and I hope YouTube doesn't crap the bed like it did today. I could not, for those of you that have never streamed before, what happens is you have a go live button on your browser that you click. Mine wouldn't light up for nothing, and I waited 5 minutes, nothing happened. And so I had to start the stream over again. But Dan, you and I are going to have lots to talk about because what you just said there, $2,000 per worker, and that kills the safety culture because everybody's chasing that bonus, not safety. Now, the other one is, of course, safety is not part of the corporate philosophy. Okay, if it's not part of your mission, vision, and values. Okay. And I'm not talking about like, well, I'll get to the next point in a sec, but safety needs to be mentioned. It needs to be part in your mission, vision, and values. And if it's not part of the corporate culture, then you know what? Then you don't have a base. You don't have a foundation. Because if you look at it this way, this is the way you need to look at your mission, vision, and values. Your vision is where you want to be, way out there. Okay, that's where you want to be. Whether it being, and people write all sorts of being the technological leader, being the leader, being the willful competitor, all of those different things. That's their vision. An organization I work for, their vision is to have incident-free workplaces. That's the one I want to work for. But your mission is the steps, the things that you're going to do, the actions you're going to take to attain that vision. And the values are what you attach to those practices to get there. Now, if safety is not part of that, all of that ingredient, man, you've got a lot of work to do. You really do. But once again, if you have that robust and healthy safety culture, as an employer, guess what? Your loss is minimized huge. And if your loss is minimized, then guess what? Your profit's going to go up because realistically, you're lifting your bottom line. It's just it in a nutshell. As a worker, guess what? If that safety culture is good and you're working and not having to look over your shoulder and worrying about your safety and security, guess what? You can increase your own promotability. You can increase your possibilities of advancement in that organization because you can focus on being more productive. Oh, Dave, excellent question. I'll answer that just when we get towards the end here with the Q&A. Excellent question. And then finally, safety professionals. Once again, I've mentioned this. If you have that robust safety culture, guess what? You can now be coaching instead of pushing compliance. You can be coaching into continuous improvement. And then the other part of the problem is, well, you know, we talked about doing something without risk. That means safety. No, you talked about doing something without risk. That doesn't mean safety. There's a lot of ways that you can remove risk. Okay. And you can transfer it for that matter. So is safety just a reach or is it ambiguous? And if it's there, is it so veiled that it's missed and people are just reaching for safety as they write these things? Wording like we want to maintain upward mobility while avoiding loss. Well, what's that mean? Okay, you're not talking safety. What you're talking about is you're still going to be chasing profit. Okay, so rather that, say our aim is to have a healthy and safe workplace, something to that effect. You know, it doesn't take much. But then the other thing is have a look at your company handbooks and publications and everything. Where's safety? Is safety a part of it? Is safety a part of your corporate communications? Because if safety isn't part of that documented communications, because when you pick up a book, it's here. It doesn't go away. It's not just a speech. It's something that's almost permanent until a new one's written. So safety should be a part of those things. So where's safety? When I went to work for SAIT, Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, and during my interview, my boss asked me, he said, my potential boss at that time, Boris was his name, awesome guy. He was incredible to work for. His successor, dumbass. But he asked me, well, why SAIT? And I said, well, honestly, in a few organizations that I've done interviews with recently, I said, yours is the only one that safety is mentioned many times, the mission, vision, and values. He says, quick, somebody get it. I haven't read it recently. And he said, you read that? And I said, yeah. Why wouldn't you want to read the mission, vision, and values of the organization you're potentially going to work for? And I read I got a hold of as many publications as I could researching for the interview, and I found that safety was all the way through it. So that's the important piece. Is safety part of those corporate communications? So here's the question you got to ask. If safety is suffering, how much? If safety is absent, is it totally absent or just somewhat? Now remember, opinions don't count, numbers do. And yes, that's a Kevinism. Okay? Opinions don't count, numbers do. So that's why you're going over and you're looking at all of these things. Because then what you need to do is start compiling your stats and delve deeper while you're compiling your stats. Look at what the root cause is. Now, in fact, your root cause might not just point to one thing. You might say, well, when we hired this guy, this all happened. But your findings may point to several different causation factors. Okay? So, Q&A time. Okay? And Dave, I'll get to you in just a sec, I promise. But there's one that I promised somebody already. So, during investigations, they asked, is it appropriate for an investigator to ask questions about legal and financial issues? And my rule of thumb, and this is a couple of different points, a couple of different ways to look at this. Number one, my rule of thumb is to always let the person say everything they're going to say. Get them talking as much as possible. You write, and if you can record it, even better. But if not, write as many notes as you can. Okay? And I thank you for this Dolly's Paradise. It was an excellent question. Got to get a drink of water here. Ain't tough. So, the other thing is, don't outrightly ask, so are you having any legal problems, divorce or whatever that, and are you going broke, bankrupt, or anything else like that? You don't have to. But easiest way that I find, and this might be a bit of a long answer to this question, but when you're going to start doing an investigation, whatever time it happened at, and if you're in hopefully you're asking these questions the same day it happened, but if not, just say, hey, let's go back to that day that everything occurred. And if it happened at lunchtime, go back and ask them what they had for breakfast and what was the drive to work like, and let them start talking. It does a few things. Number one, it puts them at ease. Number two, they are under the impression that you care about them, and I'm hoping you do. And then number three is they're going to put everything in chronological order. Now, they may have practiced that little fib or whatever, and I'll tell you how to overcome that in a sec. But as they get to that point, you can also ask them after they've told you about the incident. You can just say, okay, is there anything else weighing on your mind? Is there anything putting pressure on you where your attention might have been taken away at work? Is there anything happening outside of work that you maybe need to talk to your employee family assistance program about? Reach out to your boss and let them know, etc. Is there anything going on? I don't necessarily have to know about it. And what happens is a lot of times they open up. Some people will clam up. Then if you're worried about them lying about something, get them to tell their story backwards from when it happened all the way, or just after it happened, all the way to the beginning. Nobody ever rehearses a story backwards, at least until they watch this video. So just as another tip. But Dolly's Paradise, that's what I would do. If I was you, I would just ask them overtly if anything is going on externally that could be putting mental pressure on them. And that's it. Now, depending on the legal jurisdiction you work in and what you're doing, that might change, might be a bit different. But, and that's why here, for those of you that joined the video late, oh, good question, Dave. Two good questions. I'll answer both of those in just a sec. So, where was I here? Depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it and what the legal jurisdiction is that you're in, you can maybe ask those questions. I avoid it in the workplace. The other thing is for those of you that didn't join the video early enough, I talked about it with an investigation that's currently going on, and there's a memorandum of understanding with police forces in Alberta that if there's a fatality at work, they're part of the investigation. Often those are the questions the police will ask. Okay. Sometimes I've seen OHS investigators ask them, but those are ones that are an authority having jurisdiction versus me, an employee or a contractor. So there you go. Long answer, but there you go. Dave, so what happens when it's part of them? I'm assuming the leadership, but the leadership through merger don't toe the company line. And you were talking about the corporate philosophy, right, Dave? And I'm pretty sure you were. So what happens is, and I've seen it, like say, for instance, a large organization here, a large construction company, Stuart Olson. I watched when, first off, it was Fairmile Construction working. They were working for us when I worked at a different organization. Then they were taken over by Dominion, and they became Dominion Fairmile. Then they just became Dominion during the project. Then it was Stuart Olson Dominion. By the time the project was over, it was Stuart Olson. And same thing happened there, but it was the opposite. It was when Stuart Olson took over, they basically, it was the other folks that had to start towing the company line because they were very adamant about safety at that time. And as far as I know, they still are. I've worked with them before. But often what happens, Dave, is you'll see those things while everybody's growing pains because of a company merger. And as a safety professional, what I always tell people is read the room before you do anything. After you've read the room, you need to have a talk with your supervisor and say, look, this is how we need to start managing things. This is how I need to be managing things. And then go with that. Because I've seen it where some employees feel that, well, we've done it this way forever. Like say, for instance, with Stuart Olson Dominion, in British Columbia at the time, you didn't have to be, when you were working on a lift, you didn't have to have your harness hooked in as long as the lift had a guardrail all the way around it. In Alberta, you have to have your harness hooked up. And so Stuart Olson and Dominion, there was a bit of a clash. And they said, well, we're in BC. And Stuart Olson's philosophy at that time is it doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in, we practice the highest level of safety possible. So regardless if you're in BC or not, you hook up. And that's what they're doing. So it's very difficult. And the idea is whichever organization has the highest functioning safety program is where you should be trying to attain. You don't go down a level. You should always be trying to go up a level. However, Dave, if you're working for that kind of an organization, that environment, it's a bit of a tough haul, and hopefully you do, hopefully it works out for you. And I hope I answered that question. There is a case in the East Coast where a supervisor is appealing a prison sentence as he was not provided his rights by an OHS investigator. Does that employee have the legal rights to a rep during an interview? Absolutely, you do. However, most OHS legislation all across Canada is very similar in that you're given reasonable opportunity and time to contact a lawyer, but you cannot delay, and it's part of this piece within the OHS, the authorities having jurisdiction, the OHS officers' authority, is you cannot delay their investigation at all. And so they will give you reasonable opportunity, but if they're charged under the Act, in most cases, and I'm going to say 99% of the cases, it is usually such a slam dunk thing. Because first off, Crown prosecutors don't want to chase that unless it's a slam dunk deal. OHS authorities, the authorities having jurisdiction here, so I'm talking like Alberta OHS and WSIB in Ontario, they don't want to chase those things unless they're absolutely for certain. So he can appeal his prison sentence all he wants. I can almost guarantee without a shadow of a doubt that he was given reasonable time to contact a lawyer. It doesn't mean that you can delay the questioning. You can have the lawyer on speakerphone. Okay, so, and Dana said, in Australia, it's actually mandated through case law to use the most relevant code of practice, even if it's from another state. Is it not the same in Canada? No, actually, it's not, Dan, as long as the organization has a safety program that identifies the hazards and implements controls, it's fine. And the unfortunate part is that things differ from province to province. And so that case I talked about between Dominion and Stuart Olson, Dominion was from British Columbia, Stuart Olson was from Alberta. And so because in BC at the time, you didn't have to anchor your lanyard on your fall protection harness. And even when you were moving with a hoist, which kind of is weird, but anyway. And so that's why they were told that they had to practice the highest level. And that's really what you should be doing as a good safety professional anyway, is always promoting. And so if you're part of an organization that merges and that organization has a more stringent safety program, has a better record, then you should be wanting to do the best possible and attain what they're doing, right? It just makes perfect sense. We have to have code of practices here in Alberta, Dan, but those are a different thing. They're part of your safety management system as an organization, and they're usually written for higher risk things or higher risk or high complexity things. Like, say, for instance, respiratory protection in Alberta requires a code of practice. Confined space entry requires code of practice, etc. So usually where there's a higher consequence attached to it. And that all worked out for you, Dave? Answered your questions? Good stuff. Okay. I don't see anything else coming in the chat. Okay, so where are we? Let's talk about what's up next. So coming up next is, well, we're sick. We looked at it, thought we're hey Dan, you bet. Thought we're sick. Well, we've gone through and had a good look at the vital signs, and now we're really sick. So how do we get better? That's what's up next in this series, though. Next Saturday at 7 o'clock, it's going to be Dan and I having a talk about safety. I can just see that it's going to go on for a while because Dan, when we've talked on the phone a couple of times, or on the phone and on Zoom, we tended to talk quite a bit about stuff. So, yeah, so I hope you guys can join us for it. And I'd like to see if possible, we can make it even something that's recurring. Safety up here and safety down there, whatever the case may be, whatever we call it, but we'll see. So we'll put a pause on this for the next two sessions, because then 2 weeks after Dan and I visit, it'll be Mike and I talking about bullying and harassment. So anyway, that's about it. So if there's no other questions, no other thoughts or anything, yeah, I'll call it a night. I've talked quite a bit. My throat's starting to get sore. It's just because I've had a lack of tea in the cup. That's the problem. But anyway, yeah. Don't ask about kangaroo workplace safety. Yeah, no worries. I won't, Dan. I'd been to Australia quite a while ago, and I was there in 1982, actually. And I always thought it was neat to watch them, but I found out that Australians have a different idea on kangaroos. So, yeah. Anyway, folks, if there's no more questions, I want to thank you, those of you that have taken the time to join. If you haven't already, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. I also appreciate comments whenever I can get them. So if you're watching this later on, by all means, throw me a comment. You're also welcome to ask questions in the comments, and I try to answer them on the live streams. Keep watching. Kangaroos are, yeah, yes, they are. I just feel a bit jumpy after a good kangaroo steak, though. Anyway, also, I hope to have in a few weeks the first episodes of the hazard assessment live streams ready to go, so that I can have always a few on deck, so I'm not scrambling to do something afterwards. But they'll be roughly in the same format as these live streams. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, folks. And if you thought it was reasonable and you liked it, give me a like. I appreciate them all. So, yeah. Until we see each other again, do me a favor. Yeah. Remember that safety leadership isn't about being a manager, a CEO. It isn't even about being a safety professional. It's just about walking the walk and talking the talk, and understanding that health and safety is a necessary piece in getting the job done. Okay? So do me a favor. Provoke safety just through your own actions. Okay? Take care. Bye for now.